State Fair showdown. Republican Governor Terry Branstad seeking a sixth term as Iowa's chief executive. Democratic state lawmaker Jack Hatch challenging the legacy. Meeting at the iconic Iowa State Fair in a special one-hour debate edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing and education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. MyIowaBank.com.
The Rotary Clubs of Iowa and Rotary International.
In 1985, Rotary International committed to a goal of ending polio worldwide. Very soon now, after immunizing over 2 billion children, the goal will be achieved. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Iowa Community Foundations, an initiative of the Iowa Council of Foundations, connecting donors to the causes and communities they care about, for good, for Iowa, forever. Details at iowacommunityfoundations.org. The Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure. Iowa Communications Network. The ICN is committed to the enhancements of distance learning and continues to meet the demands for greater access of high-speed internet by educational users. For decades, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond, celebrating more than 40 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa public television. Live from the Iowa State Fairgrounds, this is a special debate edition of Iowa Press. Here is Dean Borg.
Welcome to the Penningroth Media Center inside the Iowa State Fairgrounds Cattle Barn for the first debate of Iowa's 2014 gubernatorial campaign. Hello, I am Dean Borg, and we're outside our usual studio setting, Iowa Press, now among the sights and smells of the Iowa State Fair, and more importantly, among the people of Iowa, and the two men campaigning to be their governor. Republican nominee Terry Branstad, first elected governor in 1982, serving 4 consecutive terms, and 10 years later, re-elected, now seeking a sixth term. Democratic nominee, State Senator Jack Hatch, serving in the Iowa legislature and as a Des Moines real estate developer. Gentlemen, welcome to this special Iowa State Fair edition of Iowa Press.
Thank you, Dean. Good to be with you.
And I'm certain that both of you will agree that the informality of our setting that you can see here in the cattle barn, even our dress for that matter, in no way diminishes the issues and the ideas about Iowa's future that we'll be debating here today. And you're both familiar with our traditional format, but we're in a different setting here at the State Fairgrounds with a live audience in addition to our television viewers. As they're watching and listening, they've agreed not to cheer during this one-hour debate. And much like our regular Iowa Press format, there are no preset debate rules, no opening and closing statements, just ideas and issues. I'll be moderating, and questions will be coming from political journalists. Radio Iowa News Director Kay Henderson, Des Moines Register political columnist Kathy Obradovich, and the Gazette's James Lynch. Kay?
Governor, first question, what do you plan to do in the next 4 years that you haven't accomplished in the last 20? For example, do you plan to follow through on your 1994 campaign promise to reinstate the death penalty in Iowa?
Well, for one thing, since you asked what we want to do in the next 4 years, as you know, this year we tried to pass a broadband bill to connect every Iowan. I want to expand that to be connect every acre, because it is so important to agriculture. And right now we have a gulf between what happens in our cities. They have high-speed internet. Many of the rural areas don't. I want to not only connect every Iowan, I want farmers, because technology is so important to the future of agriculture, so these agriculture machines can communicate with each other and put us in a competitive position for the world. So tonight, I'm announcing our new initiative to connect every acre. We'll put the details out on our website. I'm very excited about this. It expands on the bill that we pushed for this year, which unfortunately died in the legislature, but we'll be working for that and also for the anti-bullying bill that passed both houses, but unfortunately the Senate leaders didn't take it up in the last few days of the session. Those will be a couple of the new things that I'll be focusing on next year, building on the success we've already had, getting the state's financial house in order, reducing property taxes, and reforming education.
What about the death penalty?
Well, I don't think that there's the support in the Iowa legislature for that. I believe in focusing on things that I think have a realistic chance of passing.
Senator Hatch, our old friend David Yepsen used to say that Iowans like to keep the help around. Look at Senator Grassley, Senator Harkin. Polls show that people generally approve of the job Terry Branstad has done. Iowans are happy with the economy. What do they have wrong?
Well, the economy is going well. It's going well nationally, too. So we're very proud of the work that Iowans are doing. But what's happening is that there's stale leadership in the State House. We've got to focus more on accountability, responsibility, and transparency. We've had an administration that has created, on his own, the most scandal-ridden administration in the history of this state. Whether or not it's secret settlements, hush money, it's a no hire list that they have been creating. This is something that's not in the Iowa value tradition. So I think people feel that we need a fresh start. And a fresh start to me means that we're going to focus on education. We want to be a world leader in education. Being the best in Iowa doesn't go far enough. We also want to focus on jobs, where we have jobs where they're created in small towns and small neighborhoods in this state, not giving big tax credits to big corporations that create very few jobs. And lastly, what we want to do is also focus on our roads and bridges. They're crumbling, and we have to get to the content of the state, that rural Iowa needs help, and we can't hide from the political winds anymore. We need to be able to repair those bridges and those roads for farmers and for families.
Senator Hatch, we're going to be getting to those issues, I'm sure, but Governor Branstad, I heard two contrasting descriptive adjectives there. One was stale and the other was fresh. You're stale, you couldn't get broadband passed, you couldn't get bullying passed?
Well, we got a lot done in this last session of the legislature with a split legislature. Unlike in the United States Congress, where the president controls the Senate and he can't get anything done and it's all accusations, I instead work with both parties. We got this year...
But what's going to be different?
Well, the difference is this year we passed Home Base Iowa to bring people that come out of the military back to Iowa. That was passed by overwhelming majority. All these wild accusations he makes, Iowans know better. They know me well. I go to every county every year. They know that they're not true. These are just crazy accusations made by somebody who has never really represented the whole state of Iowa, just represents a safe Democratic district here in the largest city of the state.
Well, Senator Hatch, let me ask you, you are up against a man who has never lost an election, who has broken fundraising records in this campaign, and who leads you by 8 to 15 points, depending on which polls you look at in July. So why should Iowans invest in your campaign and believe that you have a chance to win?
I think the importance is the difference in this campaign is leadership. We've been campaigning throughout this state. I may be from Des Moines, but I've lived in Iowa my whole adult life, and this state is important to me. And when you find out what's going on today, when our limited agenda by the governor this last year is not reaching to every corner of the state, and we find out that there needs to be new leadership, and there needs to be a fresh start in education and job development and in taking care of rural Iowa, quite frankly. I think people feel that the governor's been there too long, that the governor is not in charge of his administration, that he didn't know about all these scandals that are coming on. It's nothing that I'm making up. I'm not the one that had secret settlements with fired employees. I'm not the one that had my director of administrative services have hush money to the employees. I'm not the one that had the no hire list, which Governor Branstad created in his second term. These are not things made up. These are things that are now real, and he's also been told by the courts twice that his actions have been unconstitutional. And so when you have a governor who acts unconstitutionally, he's acting above the law, he's acting without the respect of the legislature. I think people will realize that they want something fresh and new.
Governor Branstad, Senator Hatch says you've been in office too long, but when I talk to people around Iowa, the two questions they ask me relate to whether you've got another whole 4 years in you.
Yes,
they want
I
to know.
do.
Let me ask the question
I have only
first.
just begun.
Let me ask the question.
Yeah.
They want to know if you're healthy enough to serve 4 more
You bet.
years, if you might decide to leave early to give your lieutenant governor a running start if she should run for governor. Can you pledge today that if you're elected, you will serve 4
I'm a
more years?
lifelong Iowan. I grew up on a farm. I love this state. I have the energy. I signed that home-based Iowa bill in my uniform at Camp Dodge in the Gold Star Museum. I have the energy and enthusiasm to serve the state. I've got a great lieutenant governor, Kim Reynolds. She's my partner, and we're both very competitive. And we work very hard, and I'm committed to serve the entire term and do everything I can. We've only just begun. We have a lot more to accomplish. Iowans know me well enough because I go to every county that these crazy accusations are not true. When I find a problem, when I discover a problem, I deal with it. The same thing with this question about confidentiality clauses. As soon as I found out about it, I told my staff, I want to find out how many of them and where they were done, and I want to stop it. And I signed an executive order to do it. And then I asked the legislature to eliminate the confidentiality provisions for the state employee actions. And the House passed it. For some reason, the Senate Democrats wouldn't take that up and open up those records to the public. Those personnel records should be available to the taxpayers that pay for these state employees.
James?
If I could just add
Yes,
to that.
Jack, go ahead.
The question really goes to leadership. The governor has taken over 300 merit employees. These are employees that are qualified and are hired on their qualification and moved it over to political appointments. He's done that. He's fired those people. They've come back and had settlements. And what he did just last week with an administrative law judge, he took a judge that was supposed to be hired from merit positions and moved it over as a political appointee, meaning he could be fired for any reason. And now you have a judiciary responsibility in the executive branch that now can be controlled from the governor's office. That's unacceptable, and that's about leadership. And it's nothing about whether or not he found something out earlier or not. It's whether or not he should have allowed it to begin with.
I want the people to know the facts. The facts are that the Department of Administrative Services recommended these changes in positions. They were all approved by the Legislative Council. Plus, just yesterday, the Attorney General said that the reassignment of this position to the new at-will position was correct, and that was a correct interpretation. That's the Attorney General of your party that just said that yesterday in an email to a reporter from the Des Moines Register. So the facts are the facts, and you might want to create all these kind of accusations, but the truth is that all of this was done appropriately, was approved by the Legislative Council, and the Attorney General has said this particular assignment is correct.
I think you've made your point, Governor. James Lynch.
Gentlemen, you've both talked about your vision for Iowa and your multiple priorities. I want to ask, what is the one single most important problem you're going to have to deal with as governor, Senator Hatch?
Well, I think there's several. I think when we talk about the integrity of state government, we have to talk about how we perform as a partner in creating an environment and an economy that works for everybody. So the first thing I'd be looking at and I would be doing would be raising the minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 an hour. Secondly, I would reverse the strategy of...
we just need one problem you're going to address.
What the problem that addresses is bringing low-income people up to a point where they can get out of poverty. We have almost 216,000 Iowans living on the minimum wage. By bringing up the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, you create thousands of new opportunities for people, and they no longer have to depend on the public assistance that they've been dependent before. Right now, a woman working on minimum wage with 2 children earns $4,000 below poverty. We're going to correct that because that's what Iowa expects.
Governor, what one problem?
Well, the federal government is the biggest problem we have facing our state and facing our country. Good example of that, 1 year ago at the Iowa State Fair, the Lieutenant Governor and I invited Gina McCarthy, the new director of the EPA, to come here. And we were really pleased because she says, I support renewable fuel and I want to improve the relations with farmers. And look what's happened since that time. That time, the price of corn was over $6 a bushel. Farmers were making money. And what did she do? Instead, the EPA recommended, for the first time in history, a reduction in the renewable fuel standard. And we've been able to get bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats throughout the Midwest, including every senator and every representative in the Iowa legislature, saying we want to reverse that, we want to restore the robust renewable fuel standard, and it still hasn't been done. And now the price of corn in this agricultural state where we produce more corn than anywhere else, it is now way below the cost of production. It's going to drive income for Iowa farmers down to a loss.
But Governor,
this is a huge threat to our state.
But you can't get rid of the federal government. You call that a...
We need to change the leadership in Washington. We need to change the leadership in Washington. We need to have an EPA administrator who promised me 3 times a decision would be made before the end of June. And I can tell you, even Congressman Graley and all the Democrats in our congressional delegation support my position, believe we need to have the robust renewable fuel standard, but this administration has refused to do it. That's a threat to Iowa's economy and to the growth of our state. We've been successful, but we're being hurt. Agriculture has helped lead the growth in Iowa's economy and now is being dramatically hurt because of what the EPA is doing to us.
Senator Hatch, Governor Branstad earlier brought up the subject of broadband. Decades ago, politicians decided that electricity and telephone service were worthy of regulation. Is it time for government to step in and regulate broadband?
One of the problems that the legislature and the governor's office ran into in trying to establish broadband for the state, and it's a proposal that our colleagues in the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, had proposed earlier as well. So there was some agreement that we needed to do something. The special interests got involved, and they wanted to prevent it from happening. And so the difference between the House and Senate version, first it was terribly minimized, and it was a decision of the Senate that we wanted to start again. So starting again means that next year we'll have opportunities to take a look at a fresh start and whether or not we're going to have a minimum approach, or we're going to work with the industry and force the industry to understand that every town, every home needs to be connected in this state. That's a proposal that has been batted around. It's going to be a commitment that I make, and what we want to do is, if the industry doesn't support it, if they don't work for it, if they try to prevent it, if the big guys try to stop the little guys from getting broadband around this state, then we'll take a look at what we have to do to regulate the industry.
We need to go beyond that to every acre, because it's important, not only for rural Iowa, it's important for our farmers.
How do you do that?
I have a proposal. We're putting it out tonight. This is a comprehensive proposal that would expand broadband and make it available to every citizen in Iowa, small town and large town, and to our farmers, which is critically important for our competitiveness in this world economy.
Do you have the state government to do that, or are you having the private sector do that, or a quasi, some sort of...
It's a combination of things, and it's a complicated issue, as we all know, but I am committed. It will be a top priority, just as Home Base Iowa was a top priority this year, and just as property tax relief and education reform were when I came back, and I am tenacious enough to work till we get it done.
Governor, rural schools in Iowa continue to struggle with declining enrollment, and if they consolidate, there's issues that are part of that, including transportation issues. You started in your education reform to talk about distance learning, and as you expand broadband, that may be technologically possible in more places. But what extent do you believe online learning can actually address the problems facing rural schools in Iowa? And are you confident that the state can make sure that distance learning is accountable so that people don't run into problems with having an education that's not of good value?
Well, having And you know, it's related to, we just talked about broadband. If we have broadband, high-speed broadband available everywhere, it also makes distance learning easier and more accessible in all parts of the state. I also want to augment that with the community colleges. And many of our community colleges are now working with local school districts and offering courses, higher level math and science and vocational courses, and they're doing it in conjunction. I was at Monticello, Iowa, and saw what 8 small rural school districts are doing with the community college over in that part of the state. And it's really made a difference. And I want to, and also we also have something called where you can dual enroll and get college credit while you're still in high school. These are the kind of innovative things. And also economic development, such as these ethanol plants and biodiesel plants, bring good jobs to rural Iowa and can help us stabilize the population for these rural schools.
Senator Hatch, what's your prescription to make sure that kids can get a good education in Iowa regardless of where they live, and is distance learning a reasonable part of that?
Distance learning is most certainly part of that, but the most important thing we have to do for education is fund it. When Governor Branstad came into office in January 2011, he tried for 2 years to eliminate early childhood education. I'm a product of a mother, an educator, who helped me with my challenge as a young kid. I was reading first grade books in 3rd grade. She called it perceptually handicapped. Struggled with reading all the way through high school and college. But what it was dyslexia. And I could not have been a businessman in Des Moines, or a state senator, or even a candidate for governor if I didn't have somebody intervene early in my life, an educator, to make sure that I overcame those challenges. It is essential that we fund universal early childhood education. And secondly, we can't give up on our 16, 17, or 18-year-olds. These kids are allowed to quit school. Now, I don't know why we ever did that. Why do we want kids to quit school because they don't conform to the educational process that they have, to go into a pool where they automatically going to be less ready for the high jobs that we need?
The money follows where students are, however, and you've got rural schools where the students are fewer and fewer. I mean, how do you make sure that those schools continue to be quality, same as they would be in the urban areas?
I'll go back to my first answer. You have to fund education. Governor Branstad, for the 2 years, he's the only governor that never recommended additional funding for public schools, not just 1 year, but 2 years in a row. When you have a rural school and you are competing for the technology that makes learning better, you can't do it if you don't have the funds. And you're putting more burden on the property taxes of the local school districts. So distance learning is important, it's necessary, it's critical.
Governor.
Well, the
is that
fact
an
is-
albatross in your legacy, that is underfunding education?
Well, I'm going to just say, we have just passed a major education reform called teacher leadership. We just had a seminar on that. Over 500 teachers and administrators attended it. It's a very exciting new development where we reward teachers for taking on more responsibility and improving student achievement. We also reward high achievers going into teaching with a $20 million stipend paid over 5 years. And we've also provided not property tax, but state dollars to pay for, we replaced allowable growth with supplemental state aid. We did that in addition to this 3-year phase-in of the educational leadership program. So first thing we had to do is straighten out the financial mess that my opponent and his friend Governor Culver got the state in, using one-time money for ongoing expenses, taking money out of the cash reserve and economic emergency account. We did that up front, and now we've got the state in a good financial position. We are cutting property taxes. We are reforming and improving education. It's being phased in over a 3-year period, and I've got a 5-year projection on the budget, so we know it can be funded on into the future.
James?
Let's talk about funding something else, and that is Iowa's transportation infrastructure system. A lot of people who have driven here today would be concerned about the roads and bridges they were on. And for 4 years, you've been talking about, people have been asking you, and you've deferred recommendations saying you want to hear from your transportation director. In the meantime, the committee, or the panel that you appointed, as well as business groups, trucking groups, agricultural groups, local governments have all called for a gas tax increase. Governor, can you tell us today what your plan is to repair Iowa's roads and bridges? And will it include a gas tax?
I think we need to look to a different and better system to finance our roads in the future. First of all, I selected Paul Tribino as the director of the DOT. He's done a phenomenal job. When we had the flood along the Missouri River, he was able to work together and rebuild all of those roads in a record period of time and get full federal reimbursement. He's cut administrative costs by $50 million. In the last 2 years, we've had the biggest primary highway fund.
So no change.
Just a second. Wait a minute. I'm not done yet. He did that so we've saved $50 million in administrative costs, and he's also put together a whole series of options to look at replacing the gas tax with other sources of revenue, including an excise tax on fuel that would grow with inflation, including those people that bring heavier loads across the state paying more for that, and a whole series like that. But we have to build a bipartisan majority. The last time we did this, I was governor, and we did it by getting a majority of Senate Republicans and Democrats, House Republicans and Democrats, all do agree to support that. That's the kind of coalition I want to build. I have the experience of being able to do that. My opponent has no experience in doing that. He wants to look to the gas tax, and that's going to continue to decline as people get more and more fuel-efficient vehicles and move to trucks that are fueled with either LP or with natural gas. And consequently, I think a funding formula for the future needs to be developed, and that's what I'm going to work on.
Senator Hatch.
Yes, thank you, Dean. I was just listening to the governor because I've been waiting for 4 years as well. I embrace the task force that he put together of all the stakeholders, suggesting that what we need in this state is a gas tax of 10 cents. My proposal was bringing that on for 2 years, over 5 years, 2 cents at a time. 20% to 25% is paid for out-of-state motorists that come through. We've been waiting for 3 years, now almost 4 years, for the governor to come up with a plan. I listened to it. I didn't understand it. I don't think it's something that you can just wish for. Part of being governor is being a leader and telling people what we need and why we need it. We need to educate people on why a gas fee or a gas tax needs to be improved. We have in Clinton County over 35 bridges were closed or their tonnage was reduced by the Board of Supervisors. That's being replicated in rural Iowa all over the state. And for the governor to acknowledge that I'm from a small urban district in Des Moines, maybe it takes an urban legislator to understand that we have to reach out to the rural districts and provide them the tools and what's necessary. A gas tax is not trying to help.
What tools?
Well, the tools are we need to increase the gas tax to provide the services necessary to local communities to fix their bridges and expand their roads. We need to give them the authority and work more with the Department of Transportation so that they could have a greater say on where these expansions will happen. We've been waiting for 30 years for Highway 20 to be expanded. I think Governor Branstad, he must have at one time promised to expand and complete Highway 20. That hasn't happened yet. And so when he talks about bringing people together and having all this experience, I'm not sure that's the experience we need the next decade to help us provide the services we need to Iowa.
Well, my predecessor, Governor Culver, threatened that he would veto any increase in motor fuel taxes. And I'm looking at a better and newer way to do it, not just the old-fashioned way that it's been done in the past, recognizing that fuel consumption is going to go down as people go to hybrid vehicles and to electric vehicles and other vehicles. So we need to come up with a new system. And that's why I asked Paul Tribino to put these options together. I think there's a lot of interest in that. I want to work with a bipartisan group of legislators to get that done. Not just raise gas taxes on low-income people that have to commute to work.
When's it going to happen?
Next year.
Okay.
I believe it can happen next year.
Okay.
You know, it's just like property tax relief. It hadn't happened for 30 years, but we advocated for it. We worked for it for 3 years, and we got it done. And now people are seeing their commercial industrial taxes go down for the first time in 30 years. It can be done with right leadership.
And Governor, I do want to, you finally acknowledge that what we did was decrease commercial property taxes.
And industrial.
We did not reduce residential property taxes. The average Iowan will not see their reduction in property taxes as a result of Governor Branstad's 3-year trust of trying to reduce property taxes.
K-zero
only
in
for
on that.
commercial.
We're going to talk about...
Industrial, and I would also say we put some limitations on residential and agriculture as well as part of that legislation.
Clearly not enough.
And for residential that live in apartments, they've been treated as commercial. Over 10 years, they're now going to be treated as residential. So we did get a lot done in that legislation, and it was a bipartisan compromise.
Governor, I've been out on the campaign trail, and I've heard 2 Republican candidates for the Iowa House say they want to get rid of Iowa's individual income tax. Do you support that? And what kind of a proposal do you have to present Iowans before November to tell them how you're going to cut their individual income taxes?
Well, if you look at my record, I have reduced the individual income tax on a number of occasions. But I want to do it in a fair way, and I want to reduce taxes for everyone. I don't think it's realistic to eliminate the income tax. But the income tax in Iowa is still too high. We do have full federal deductibility, however, so the effective rate is much lower than it looks like in the charts. It was 13% when I became governor. It's now 8.98% plus full federal deductibility. And when Obama got the Congress to raise the federal taxes, that's deductible on the Iowa tax. The Iowa tax actually went down in 2013 while the federal tax went up.
You have once before proposed getting rid of that deduction that you mentioned. Will you propose that again?
We haven't decided in terms of what to do on that. My opponent has proposed that because the problem with that is it raises taxes for a lot of people in all levels, not just the high income people, but people at all levels. Because if you had paid a lot of federal taxes as a farmer, let's say because you had a good year, then you have a bad year, like it's going to come up thanks to the EPA, you want to be able to deduct those federal taxes. You take that away from them, that could be a real problem.
Senator Hatch, is his criticism of your income tax cut appropriate?
Well, it's not thorough. My income tax proposal, which I proposed last September, was a tax cut for the middle-class working families of the state. 90% of the families of Iowa would receive a tax cut under my plan, some of as high as $1,000. And we did that by looking at 2 things. One, we looked at dual-income families. Iowa has one of the highest dual-income families in the country, where the mother and father are working, and some of them are working 2 and 3 jobs. So why don't we reward dual-income families, the productivity that Iowans have, and get a tax cut for that? Secondly, we looked at the child tax credit. A lot of families, we value children a lot in this state, and that's one of the nice things that we are proud of. But we only give them a $40 tax credit. I value children more than that. So we gave them a $500 tax credit. And what that did was lower the taxes for everybody except for the top 5%, 6%, 7%. And they have to pay higher taxes. And in a progressive tax structure, which is what this will be created, they're still paying lower taxes than the national average. So we think it's fair that 90% of the people of the state get a tax break, while the others pay a little bit more.
Kathy?
Governor, following up on discussion about tax cuts, Kansas, one of our neighbors, cut taxes in anticipation of seeing revenue growth through business expansion. It didn't happen, and now they're in a serious economic crisis, including seeing their interest rate or their bonding rates being affected. How can you be sure if Iowa cuts taxes that we won't be making the same mistake?
That's why you've got to be very careful. That's why I've been very cautious when I've looked at this. And first of all, you got to get your state's financial house in order. You have to reduce the size and cost of government. We've reduced the size of government by over 1,450 employees. We have made state government more efficient and accountable. And we put together a 2-year budget and 5-year projections. So we have the money to provide the reimbursement to local governments to pay for the property tax reductions and for the additional money we're investing in education. And our budget balances out for the 5 years. But that's the reason why when I saw revenue start dropping after the legislature adjourned, I vetoed $135 million of one-time spending, because I don't want to put the state in a jeopardy of not being able to meet its obligations in the future, like happened under Governor Culver, and then he panicked and did a 10% across-the-board cut, which hurt local governments and a lot of people.
Senator Hatch, let's talk about the budget surplus for a second. You've got a number of proposals that spend some of that money in the budget surplus, which really has been sort of, has already been committed for education reform and paying communities back for their property tax cuts. So, I mean, how does your agenda fit economically into the reality of the picture in Iowa?
One of the proudest bills that I floor managed and helped create was in 1992 when we passed the Budget Balancing Act, which required the state to go on general practice, accounting practices, and also required presenting or budgeting only 99% of the expected revenues, creating cash reserves. We did that. And over the next 6 or 7 or 8 years, those cash reserves came up. One of the things that I am just totally mystified with Governor Branstad's approach and what he says constantly about how he came into Iowa in 2011 and, boy, the Iowa state government was a mess. Now, let me set the record straight. When he came in 2011, we had a balanced budget. We had $550 million in surplus. We had $400 million in cash reserves. We had a AAA bond rating. And in that year, Governing Magazine rated Iowa as the 3rd best managed state in the country. What Governor Branstad's talking about, and he's now talking about one-time funding, was the bonding proposal that Governor Cover and the legislature agreed to fund after the 2008 flood of eastern Iowa, the largest natural disaster that hit Iowa. Decimated towns and cities all over eastern Iowa. Cedar Rapids, where my lieutenant governor candidate Monica Vernon is from, was 16 feet underwater. And anybody that lives in eastern Iowa knew what went on. And we worked with the local communities to bring it back because we bonded for a recovery. The recovery that hit small towns and big cities up and down the Cedar
Senator
and Iowa
Hatch,
region.
are you saying that without your leadership, eastern Iowa wouldn't have recovered?
No, it's that without the bonding proposal. The bonding proposal that Governor Cover, which he's talking about of the mess.
All right, let me go to Governor Branstad.
Let me just finish up because I think this is important. The budget, the balance, and the state budget was balanced. We had a reserve, we had ending balances.
Right.
We had, and Governor Cover cut 10% across the board because we were in the biggest recession since the Depression.
Okay.
We then appropriated bonding, debt financing, as an offer to reestablish and re-engage and reinvest in Iowa. That's what he's talking about. That was a decision, and right now that's being paid back by funds from the lottery, not the general funds. It was financed and it's managed well.
Governor, I can see you're on the edge of your chair.
Yeah,
well, it's interesting because last time I ran against Big Debt Chet, and now he's supporting the big debt that we ended up with. And by the way, we are paying it back to the tune of $55 billion a year. That's right, we're paying it back out of the infrastructure money that could have gone for infrastructure projects. Instead, it's going to pay this debt. And I can tell you, most of the people in Iowa didn't like the state of Iowa going into debt. It wasn't well thought out. And frankly, the state is much better off under our economic approach, which is a pay-as-you-go approach, where we balance the budget and where we restore, and all of the money in the cash reserve and the economic emergency account wasn't still there.
Okay,
they had borrowed a significant share of it, taken it, and we have restored all of that.
We're going to leave it there.
Dean,
and go
I just need to say one thing. This is important because this is about leadership, this election. And for the governor to just dismiss the $1.4 billion that was destroyed by that flood in 2008. What kind of aid are you going to give the people of Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Oakville, Mason City, Waterloo that were decimated by this? Fire stations, community centers, roads, schools, all those public buildings were just decimated. I think what he's saying is, if you don't have the cash, we'll wait till next year. In this case, it would have been 10 years later.
Just
people of eastern Iowa understand what he's saying.
One more statement before we move on.
Well, first of all, I'd like to respond and say, I've been the governor through a lot of disasters, and I've always worked, in fact, this year already, we have dealt with 3 national disasters, and I have worked with our state people, and we've requested and we've received presidential designations. Significant amount of this is federal dollars. The state has to match. There's a local match as well. It needs to be a partnership. I know how to do that. We've done it effectively. And you don't have to go out and borrow a bunch of money just because there's going to be disasters, and this year we've already had 3. And just about every year, you never know when you're going to have a hailstorm, a plane crash, a tornado, or something like that. You got to deal with it. I go to the scene and work with local people, and we have effectively dealt with it without borrowing money.
And I need to deal with time, and we're short on it. So, James?
Governor, you've signaled that you want to make some changes in the Public Employee Pension Program, IPERS, which is now a defined benefit plan, and you've suggested that firefighters and police should pay more into their retirement
They're
fund.
not under
What are you trying to fix? What's the problem you're trying to fix?
Well, the problem is that, and first of all, Iowa's retirement program for public employees is a lot better shape than about 70% of the other states. We're right next to Illinois. The state of Illinois, where the president's from, where the Democrats control everything, the worst unfunded pension system in the country, the most state and local debt per capita, and they're way behind in paying their bills, and they raise taxes.
Let's talk about IPERS.
I don't want to do that. Instead, and by the way, the IPERS system is healing. Because of changes that have been made, the IPERS system is getting better, and it's not back to fully 100% funded as it was when I was governor before, but we're on our way to improving it.
So
I don't think it's fair that the police and fire system, that all the increase falls on the cities. I think like IPERS, which is 60-40 by the employer and 40% by the employees, that a similar system ought to be in place for the police and fire system as well.
Are you proposing any change or just leave it as it is?
I think that kind of a change would make sense. I want to see a bipartisan group of citizens look at this with representation from public employees and taxpayers to look at how to best address this for the long term. I don't want to become another Illinois or New Jersey or these other states that have unfunded pension systems, or cities in California that have gone bankrupt because of it.
Senator Hatch, IPERS has an unfunded liability in the $6 billion range. Do you think that steps need to be taken to close the gap between resources and liabilities, and how would you go about that?
Well, we are, as the governor said, stronger today than we were in the past. We constantly change that every 2 years. The legislature, in a bipartisan way, works hard in trying to close that gap. It's one in which we work with the public unions, as well with the state agencies and the financial conditions of the world, or of the state. But what's interesting is we're talking about pensions, and you know, we have the ability in this state to provide good pensions for good employees. I think that when it comes to fire and police, they deserve what they get. They deserve those pensions. They are the first respondents.
So how would you do
anything.
that? Senator Hatch, how would you do that?
Well, what's going on now is that the burden lies mostly with the local governments.
Yes.
And we should, maintain that. There's some changes that we could do that they look at every year to see how far we have to go.
Yes.
We want to keep it strong, but to completely change it and make it into a 401k and private venture, I think is dangerous.
Governor,
especially.
That's not what I advocated. I said make it similar to the IPERS system, where the increases are shared with the employees who get the benefits and with the local governments, the cities that are paying the cost of it. I hear from big cities all over the state of Iowa, including your mayor, complaining about this, that wants us to address it. I'm willing to do it.
Governor,
he isn't.
Let's move on.
The city of Toledo, Ohio, the residents there were unable to drink the water for a few days because of algae bloom in Lake Erie. Experts said it was largely caused by fertilizer runoff. The Des Moines Water Works manager says that ratepayers in Des Moines are paying higher water rates because of the extraordinary measures he has to take to treat the drinking water here. Governor, at what point is it required to have mandatory rules in regards to fertilizer use versus the current voluntary system?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of the fact that we worked on a nutrient reduction strategy which has received national recognition for our leadership. And that has included Iowa State University with their knowledge and expertise in this area, the Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Governor's Office. We just yesterday in this ring gave out 85 awards for environmental stewardship to farmers that are doing things to reduce pollution and making many changes to protect our water and soil.
So voluntary is working?
Yes, it's working, and we need to continue to perfect and improve on it. We've increased funding by about 26% since I've been governor for these kind of projects. So I believe that's the right approach. A mandatory approach that puts agriculture at a disadvantage, I don't think is the right way to
Senator
go.
Hatch.
Senator Hatch, farmers say that urban residents put a lot of fertilizer on their lawns. Would you favor restrictions on urban fertilizer use as well?
The first thing that I want to say is that the problem of nitrates and phosphates in our water is not just a farmer's issue. It's all of us. Anybody who puts fertilizer on your land, you're adding to the problem. Anybody, the golf courses and municipalities, the corporations, farmers are not the only ones. But the problem that we have is not so much in the reduction strategy plan, because that was required by the federal government. And it's a good plan. It's a good plan to start. And, you know, we want to talk about voluntary. If you don't fund it, then it's not going to be voluntary, and it ends up being nothing. And the governor vetoed $11.2 million of water quality money that would go to direct the attention to reduce the nitrates and the phosphates and the management of the very plan he said got national recognition. If you don't fund it, then you don't have a plan. And it's very telling that the legislature came up with the recommendations, bipartisan support. Even the Secretary of Agriculture, Bill Northey, was disappointed in the governor's veto of that.
Kathy?
We need better leadership and a fresh start to make sure that we look at this in a bipartisan and stakeholder way.
We've got a long list of topics and short time. So a quick answer here. Do you believe that Iowa should allow a pipeline across the state from the oil fields in North Dakota through to Illinois? And if so, what about taking private property through eminent domain?
It was a big surprise to me that when I read in the Des Moines Register that the pipeline was going through 17 counties. They acted as if they were going to build it within a year and a half, that they had the permission. I don't know what their relationship with the state agencies have been.
Yes or no?
Well, I don't. In one regard, it's going to help the big oil to get more oil down in Louisiana. On a bad way, it's going to, without knowing the details of it, there's environmental degradation that could take place. And so we need information. We need transparency, and we're not getting it from that oil company. And we should be getting it from the Department of Natural Resources and the Utility Board and the governor's office, and we haven't gotten it yet.
That sounds sort of like an I don't know. Is that what you're saying?
The question is nobody knows. That's the question, but the governor should know.
Do you know?
Okay, I've had one meeting with the people that are proposing this, and the first thing I shared with them, they're from down in Texas. This is not Texas or Oklahoma. We have some of the most valuable farmland in the world. They want to go diagonally across the state. I grew up on a farm. I understand there's a lot of tile lines. They tell me they'll go 2 feet below the tile lines. They will repair all the tile lines. There's a lot of questions that have to be answered. The utility board has a responsibility to oversee this. They've had one informational meeting with the utility board. They need to have meetings by law in every county that this is going to go through, and especially the landowners that are affected. I think it needs to be very carefully reviewed to see if this is something that's in the interest of our state.
Sounds to me like both people here are saying we'll keep an eye on it.
Right.
James?
Jim's going to...
Governor, when you ran 4 years ago, you said one of the things that you promised was that you'd do a better job of running state government.
Right.
A lot of people are questioning, your opponent Jack Hatch is questioning that. He's been at the forefront of a lot of criticism of your management style. If the stories coming out of the Department of Administrative Services and the Iowa Veterans Home are accurate, your management style isn't working. Are you able to change, and can you change? What will you change in the next 4 years?
Well, first of all, I always look for the very best people, and if we discover a problem, we change it. So when we've had a problem in those agencies, we've changed and put new people in charge. We now have, by the way, we have women in charge of both those departments, new leadership. I think that Janet Phipps is doing a great job with the Department of Administrative Services. Jody Tymonson, who's a retired general from the Iowa National Guard, is now the commandant of the Veterans Home. I think she's doing a great job. I was just with her when we had the Veterans Parade here at the State Fair. And so we have made the adjustments and changes, and we have put good people in charge of departments and agencies. We've reduced the size of government. I have a press conference every week. We have opened the records now. So the big problem we've got is these individual employee records, that when we do have a dismissal, the public is not given the information as to why. That personnel information should no longer be exempt from the open records law, and I'm advocating that. For some reason, my opponent and his friends in the Senate blocked that, even though the House passed it overwhelmingly.
Senator Hatch, you've been at the forefront of criticizing the governor on his management style, but what do Iowans need to know about you and your qualifications to manage an enterprise with a $7 billion general fund budget and about 50,000 employees? Are you up to that? Do you have the experience and the qualifications to manage that enterprise?
Well, I could tell you that my wife and I manage our small business where we develop affordable housing in 2 cities in the state. Monica Vernon is a small business owner, and she, for 26 years, managed her company. We subscribe to management principles that understand that you got to know what your people are doing. You just can't pretend that they're going on. You've got to be hands-on, and you got to be involved. This governor has not been involved, to the point that even one of his previous chief of staff said that he has a governance problem. So when that happens, we know we have an issue in state government. And you can't continue to blame employees. You can't continue to blame somebody else. You can't continue to say, I don't know. You're going to have to take responsibility and fix the problem. But really, what you want in a governor is somebody who finds the problem before it becomes an issue.
Senator Hatch, I'm going to end it right there and go on to Kay Henderson.
You've been a critic of the state deal that is bringing an Iowa fertilizer plant to southeast Iowa. People in southeast Iowa are grateful for the jobs. What do you say to those folks?
Well, first you have to understand that I am not opposed to the fertilizer plant or any construction of fertilizer plants of the state. What I opposed was the negotiated deal the governor made with a company that's building it, giving them $110 million, giving them enforcing or negotiating with the local community to give them another $150. Iowa was the only state, not Illinois, that was able to get qualifications for disaster related to flood aid, that they got $3 million on that. In all, public taxpayers paid $3.2 million per job for that, and that's what I was referring to. Secondly, we have in that fertilizer plant the CEO that just bought the second most expensive condominium in New York City, $70 million, and he paid cash for it. Why are we giving these kinds of incentives to corporations instead of looking where job growth really is? It's in the small towns. It's in small businesses. And I'm not the only one that thinks it's a bad deal. An Iowa state economist said it's the dumbest deal in the history of the state of Iowa.
I'm going to let Governor Branstad.
Well, Site Selection magazine said this was the second best deal in the whole world last year. I've been to that site. There are 1,750 very good jobs, a lot of them union construction jobs going on there right now. And my opponent and his colleagues in the Senate would like to shut down that construction site. Plus, the Iowa Farm Bureau estimates once it's completed, it will save Iowa farmers $740 million. $740 million each and every year. This was not a check that was written to them. They're given a credit against future tax. The state and local governments are both going to get more revenue, more tax revenue from them than if they had chosen to locate in another state or stayed overseas. Right now, we're importing this fertilizer from overseas.
Right,
this is bringing it home,
Governor,
creating good jobs here.
Senator Hatch,
yes,
quickly.
I'd just like to ask the governor if he'd be willing to withhold the last $25 million in state tax credits to Orascom. They were supposed to get it in July. Your authority has not given it to them yet. Would you commit today that you would withhold that money so that this dumbest deal in the history of the state of Iowa wouldn't be as bad?
Well, you want to shut down that site and put those people out of work?
No, that's not what I said at all.
Yeah, that would renege on the deal that was made at the very beginning. And the deal, by the way, was that if the legislature didn't reduce the tax on corporations by so much, then this part would occur. Mr. Bolcom, who's been the biggest critic of this, and your buddy, is the one that has prevented us from reducing that commercial property tax.
Okay.
The very people that are complaining about this the loudest are the ones that are making it necessary for us to complete the deal that was agreed upon.
Very quickly, a lot of communities in the state see gambling as a form of economic development. This year, the Racing and Gaming Commission said that a casino in Cedar Rapids would cause too much competition with other states. Governor, let's start with you. Would you side with those who say the market should pick the winners and losers in gambling instead of state government?
I believe the Racing and Gaming Commission should make that decision. I think it would be wrong for there to be political interference. I think they should follow the law and look at all the criteria in determining what is in the best interest of the people of Iowa. Protecting the integrity of the state and making sure that it's safe and fair is critically important.
I'm going to take that as an answer, Senator Hatch.
Well, I would certainly, as a small business person, I understand the market, and I would let the market decide that. We shouldn't be picking winners and losers, and there's nothing in the state statute that says we have to protect the other casinos. That is, there's no other industry where state government is protecting the profits of all the casinos. We should have understood this. I think there's a problem there, and also, there is a former attorney, or there's an attorney that is now suing the commission because, there's something wrong going on.
This is the final question, Kate.
Gentlemen, we're at the Iowa State Fair. I'm wondering if you think there's a competition out here you could enter and win. Senator Hatch?
I like to think of it as the pie-eating contest.
Governor Branstad?
Well, I've won the governor's steer show at least 3 times, but this year, Lieutenant Governor Reynolds beat me. But anyway, I think it's great competition. We've raised $2.5 million for the Ronald McDonald houses, promoted the beef industry. It's one of the greatest things that happens here. We started my first year as governor. The governor's charity steer show is one of the greatest things that we started here at the Iowa State Fair.
Well,
Proud of it.
Let me just ask. He said he'd like to eat a pie. Would you bake it?
My grandmother used to make the best apple pies. He probably wouldn't eat it if I made
it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the comments that you had.
That's a great way to end it.
Thank you. Thank Iowa Public Television.
Thank you. This is the first in a series of Iowa Public Television special fall election programming, bringing you the candidates and the issues challenging us all as Iowans. It'll be Iowa's most extensive statewide debate series right here on Iowa Public Television as we travel the state. Congressional candidate debate telecast now coming up from Iowa City and Council Bluffs in the coming weeks. And in addition to our appreciation to Governor Branstad and Senator Hatch today, we're deeply grateful to our Iowa Public Television production staff for the late night into the early morning hours involved in transforming this livestock pavilion into the forum used for the transformational ideas for Iowa's future. So, for the entire Iowa Public Television crew, live from the Iowa State Fairgrounds in Des Moines, I'm Dean Borg, and thanks for joining us today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing and education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. MyIowaBank.com.
The Rotary Clubs of Iowa and Rotary International.
In 1985, Rotary International committed to a goal of ending polio worldwide. Very soon now, after immunizing over 2 billion children, the goal will be achieved. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Iowa Community Foundations, an initiative of the Iowa Council of Foundations, connecting donors to the causes and communities they care about, for good, for Iowa, forever. Details at iowacommunityfoundations.org. The Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure. Iowa Communications Network. ICN's connectivity offers Iowa's rural hospitals and clinics access to telemedicine opportunities. Iowans can eliminate distance barriers by receiving medical treatment closer to home using remote specialists.